fast, die young.
Hello, and actually this is an episode of Chewing the Fat, not industry interviews, as the video may have suggested just then. We didn't have time to do a Chew the Fat intro for our top 10 Westerns, which is what we're going to be talking about today. If you can't catch the stream today, or you're tuning in at the beginning and you're going to tune off again, that's perfectly fine. It's going to stay up. It's going to stay part of the Outcasts Creative channel content. Do come in and check it out anytime. Now, I've got a great co-host with me tonight, and not everybody likes to go on camera. Movie Guy 24/7 is one of those who embraces that philosophy, so he will be joining me on audio only. He's been reviewing movies pretty much since the day he was born, and is probably around the same age as me, i.e. in his early 30s. So we've been looking at the same kind of movies as we've been growing up. And so I want to welcome Movie Guy 24/7. You'll find his details in all the blurb below to the stream. None other than George Rother. Welcome, George. How you doing?
Hi, Lance. And it's Rother.
It's pronounced Rother. I'm so sorry. I probably should have been very professional and clarified that before we started.
A lot of people get it wrong. It's the German pronunciation, Rother.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, look, George, thanks so much for agreeing to be my co-host. We've been friends on Facebook for, I think it's probably nearly a decade now. It certainly seems like quite a long time. But you're one of the few friends of mine on Facebook that I've not met in person, and I have met most of them. Oh God, my Facebook notifications. I really do need to close that. And let me close Facebook for a minute. Thank you, Laura, for that. Yeah, but George is always posting up about favorite films, and he really does know his actors as well, and always does a little obituary when we lose one of our one of the top sort of, well, not just the top actors, but all the character actors, all the little people as well. That's one of the things that I'm really impressed with is your knowledge of actors throughout the ages. I mean, you really do know them well. When did you first really get into films? What was the first film that you saw at the cinema? Do you remember?
Well, from what I'm told, the first movie I was taken to see at the cinema was The Malachi Papers with Charles Bronson. I was like maybe 2 or 3 years old. And I suspect my dad took me because my mom wanted me out of her hair for a few hours. So, now, the first one I can actually consciously remember seeing and kind of understanding, that would probably have to be a Disney film called The Strongest Man in the World.
God, I remember that. That showed on one Saturday night in the UK on like The Wonderful World of Disney in colour. And sorry, I just had to dive across the room there because suddenly my television switched itself on, and I was getting some sort of advert coming out. But I remember that movie. Was that one of the ones that a really young Kurt Russell starred in by any chance?
Yes, that is one of the 3 films in which he played college student Dexter Riley.
That's
right.
right.
Seemed to be getting into some scientific shenanigans.
Yeah, and I vaguely remember a couple of the others, and I'm sure
The computer wore tennis shoes.
That's it.
You see them, now you don't.
Yeah.
Those
Well, tonight we're going to be talking about none other than our favorite westerns, and I guess we've both created a top 10 list. So I've done a top 10.
I forgot to do that.
Did you?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, mate, you trying to give me a heart attack here or what? Well, I certainly haven't forgotten to do it. and I'll have to say that it was extremely difficult. I had a really hard time trying to fit all my choices on. In fact, I couldn't fit all my favorite westerns on this list. I'm going to give a special mention to some of the ones that didn't make it on there. We had some caveats for the creation of this list. One was that the film should be, I guess, what you would call traditional westerns. I didn't want to include any crossovers, so we weren't, for example, including things like Cowboy versus Aliens, although that is a fun movie. And I kind of wanted to also stay away from historical dramas that might cross into that era. I mean, Alamo probably would have been an okay choice, but things like Gettysburg, no, because that's more of an American Civil War film than it is a Western. So we were quite specific. Now, we didn't want to exclude Westerns that are made in other countries. So in our list today, there may well be some Westerns that were set outside of the USA. But they've still got to be around the same time period. So people riding horses, cowboy hats, and 6-gun holsters, and all this kind of thing, and so on. Well, one of the things that, before we jump onto the list, one of the things that I thought, I've got 6 things written down that I think make a great Western movie. Let's see, George, how many of those you can guess. What do you think the 6 things are on my list?
That would make a great Western movie.
Yeah.
Well, if it's anything like mine, I would have to say plenty of shootouts.
Well, I do have, I guess, yeah, I've got, number 6 on my list is good action scenes.
Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, there's got, if you're going to have a great Western and it's going to lead up to some kind of confrontation or ending, climatic conclusion, there's got to be a shootout somewhere, really. So
okay, here's another.
Yeah.
A badass hero.
Yeah, I've got great villains and great heroes. That's number 2 on my list. Very good. 2 for 2. Number 3.
Oh my. Okay. Period authenticity.
Authentic period and production design. That is number 4 on my list. So that's 3 for 3 so far. Very good. These are the things I was looking for in my choices. What else?
Oh boy. Great scenery.
Yeah, that also comes under what I've put: great locations and cinematography. I mean,
Okay.
capturing those expansive landscapes, the sunsets, the kind of rough but beautiful terrain, the rawness, of the period, all of that stuff, and just shooting it in a way that encapsulates the history, I think is vital. I've got 2 things left that I think are vital for a great Western movie. One of them, I would say, is probably the most important thing in any film genre to make up a good film for me. And then the second one, I think, is particularly important for Westerns, but also good for other films. The first of those is a cracking script, because I've seen plenty of crap Westerns. If you haven't got a good script, you haven't got a good film. All starts with the script. And the second one, and the last one on my list of 6, is a great score. The music. Really do
say that.
Yeah, I really do think the music is pretty important. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the music on some of our choices, because it's certainly impacted my list. And the films I've picked are films that I've picked films that I've got rewatch value, that I've wanted to watch them again and again. I've picked films that have moved me emotionally. I've picked films that I thought were original as well as iconic. And I've picked movies that impacted me at the time I watched them, and that's partially reflected in my age and when I got into the genre. And I probably started watching Westerns like anytime there was one on, I wanted to watch it, probably from about 7 or 8 years of age. So not as young as you, George, 3, diving into the cinema at 3 years old. So number 10 on the list, as you're my guest, you can go first. So what's your number 10 pick? So we don't get reverse order here.
Okay. Well, my number 10 pick is a spaghetti Western, a subgenre of Western I happen to really love. And this particular spaghetti Western is entitled Death Rides a Horse. It's from 1967, and it stars Lee Van Cleef and John Philip Law.
Death Rides a Horse. And, tell me, I've seen it, but I've got to admit, I have not seen that in a really long time. In fact, the last time I watched that was probably at my parents' house. That's right. I remember it. And it's funny because you look at the poster and it almost looks like it's starring Clint Eastwood.
Almost.
Yeah, almost. It's directed by Giulio Petroni.
Yes.
An Italian director of that time, 14 directing credits. I think this might have been his only Western.
I think so.
And what is it that about this one in particular that made it on your list? What is it about it that you like? I mean, Lee Van Cleef obviously is iconic in many Westerns.
Well, first I should probably explain that whenever I compile a top 10 list like this, I just kind of go with the flow, like whatever strikes me at the moment. Okay, maybe I do have a particular favorite in the genre, which we'll get to later. I'll tell you what my favorite is later. But, the other ones, well, they can be kind of fluid. So at the moment, when I was putting together this list, Death Rides a Horse rode into my mind. And I just remember being I thought it was really cool. It had like this dark tone to it. And I was actually turned on, to it by reading Roger Ebert's negative review of it. It sounded like it was cool. I found it, and I've seen it a few times over the years. And I just think it's good.
Okay, fantastic. When was the last time you watched it?
Probably 2014. If I remember correctly, it was when I was recovering from, I pulled some muscle in my back and I was laid up for a couple of days. So I kind of made it a spaghetti Western festival. And that was one of the ones I watched.
Well, I'm going to put that down on my list of ones. I mean, I have seen it, but not for a very long time. So I'm going to put that down on my list of ones to watch in the near future. Death Rides a Horse. And what I'm doing is I'm up, because I don't have a producer on this show, I'm updating my list as we go so that it will be saved on the stuff under all the blurb under the video. That's George's number 10 pick is Death Rides a Horse, Italian spaghetti Western from 1967. My number 10 pick is an Australian Western from 1990 called Quigley Down Under, starring Tom Selleck, Laura San Giacomo, who I absolutely had a massive crush on at the time that I saw it, and none other than the ultimate movie bad guy, may he rest in peace, Alan Rickman, one of my favorite actors of all time. This was a bit of a controversial choice because it was a toss-up between this and The Sons of Katie Elder for this position on my list. And in the end, I thought, you know what? I really want to pick a Western on the list that's not set in America. And I've always really enjoyed this one. It's directed by Simon Windsor. I saw it in the cinema. It was great on the big screen. And I mean, yeah, basically it's Matt Quigley, who's played by Tom Selleck, is sort of visiting Australia and goes to visit an old friend and takes on a job, but he realizes that he's actually working for the bad guys and he ends up kind of siding against them. It's got a lot of interesting themes to do with the Aborigines and racism and that kind of thing, which are all very relevant today. But Rickman brings a certain panache and comedy to the piece. I really like the music as well. There's the production has got a really nice score. It's got some fantastic supporting cast, including Ben Mendelsohn, who you might know is the main villain in Rogue One, who plays one of the henchman bad guys, and just a really nice cast. It's written by John Hill. I'm trying to remember who did the soundtrack for it. I'm trying to get it up on IMDb here, but my other computer's being a bit laggy. But I highly recommend it. Have you seen it?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it a few times. I really like it.
Ah, there we go. See, so it also passes George's approval, people. That's good. In fact, see, I'm being a bit lacking here because I've actually got I'm really organised today. You wouldn't know that, but I've actually got a little ticker to put up. See, there we go. Lance's number 10 now scrolling across the screen. I should put these up as soon as I talk about them. So that was my number 10 pick, Quigley, Down Under. All right, let's move on to number 9. And people in chat, I know there's 4 of you watching right now. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you've got any questions or want to just chuck in some of your own favourites, stick them in the list on the chat. We may get a chance to talk about those as well. So, George, what's your number 9 pick for top 10 Westerns?
Oddly enough, I actually just changed my number 9 choice just a few minutes ago.
Okay.
Like I said, fluidity. It was Shane, but now I changed it to what I think is one of the ultimate Westerns, The Magnificent Seven.
The original. And
absolutely. Hey, the remake is good. I'll grant it that. That was a good movie. I enjoyed it, but there's no beating the original with Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen was in it.
Well, if you look at the scrolling thing on the screen now, you'll see it says Lance's number 9 choice, The Magnificent Seven, 1960.
No way, both of us chose it?
Yeah, but that's fine. It doesn't matter if we both pick the same thing. And if you bring up something that's on my list further on, I'll say it's on my list, but I won't say where. So we both talk about the film then. So Ollie says it sounds like you're down a well a bit. Well, that's not surprising, Ollie, because George has got some audio issues. So we're having to stream his audio, not via StreamYard, but via different means. But I think he can hear you. So that's good. I might turn up the volume a little bit. There we go. So, Magnificent Seven. Go on. Tell us why you picked it.
Well, like I said, it's got this amazing cast. Steve McQueen, right? He's in that.
Yep. Yeah, Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson, Brad Dexter, the one that no one remembers, Yul Brynner, Robert Vaughn, who became the man from U.N.C.L.E., James Coburn. They're all in there, and I know them off by heart. Eli Wallach is the villain, indeed.
And he's the villain in a movie that I'll name later, sort of. But yeah. I've seen The Magnificent Seven a few times, and it's just always impressed me. It's a good story, and I might add, it's also a really good adaptation of Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai.
Seven Samurai, indeed. Yeah. Which is an absolutely fantastic film. If anybody watching hasn't seen it, they should check it out. I suspect that some people would think that Seven Samurai is slow by modern standards, but if you can watch it on a big screen or even just a really fantastic home cinema setup, I really think you'll appreciate the skill and staging that goes into that movie, and it's a really, really brilliant film. I have a particular affection for The Magnificent Seven because I've written a play called Seven Magnificent Egos, which I'm actually going to publish on Amazon later this year. But I'm trying to get it staged, and it's about the making of The Magnificent Seven and what went on behind the scenes. So, and there were 3 writers that worked on it. Did you know that?
On The Magnificent Seven?
Yeah.
Let me take a look here. William Roberts?
Yeah.
Kurosawa, of course, and somebody named Walter Bernstein.
Yeah, and there was a third writer as well who did a few touch-ups on the set, and they went through three people as well as crediting Akira Kurosawa. And so when if we get to stage to play, or when all the actors will actually play not only the Magnificent Seven, but they play all three writers. They play John Sturges, the director. They play all the producers. One of the producers, last time I checked, by the way, is still alive. I think he's like in his 90s. He's right up there, and he's still alive. Walter Newman and Walter Bernstein were the two Walters that worked on the script, and William Roberts, who got the main credit.
I think the producer that's still alive is Walter Mirisch.
Yeah.
And if he is correct, he's 100 years old.
He is in fact 101. So Walter Mirisch is 101 years old. I mean, it would be fantastic if I could get the play on while he was still alive. Whether or not he'd be cognizant enough to understand it, I don't know. But yeah, and he produced. He also has a production credit on the remake of The Magnificent Seven. I mean, you said you quite liked the remake.
I enjoyed it very much. Yes. I mean, again, it doesn't have the same awesome cast as the original. But come on, you're not going to get a cast like that ever again.
No, true, indeed. Yeah, I went to see the remake at the IMAX, and I don't know what it was, but there was something about it for me that was really lacking. I think it was. I didn't particularly like the way the action was staged, and there was a lot of things about the setup for the action and like the final battle that kind of sort of weren't really logical. I mean, I haven't watched it in a while, so maybe I need to watch it again. But I recall that was my gripe with it at the time, and I mean, I think I'm probably not really a fan of remakes anyway. But then technically, of course, it was a remake of a remake of a remake.
Yeah.
And we could talk about Battle Beyond the Stars, but that's a that's a different film. That's a different bag altogether. But so our number 9 pick for both of us was The Magnificent Seven, which is great because I've already got that on my timestamp, so I don't have to add a different film for you there. So number 8 pick then, George. What you got?
The Big Country.
Okay, that's another one I've not seen in a long time.
That is what we call an epic. Directed by William Wyler, it stars Gregory Peck, Gene Simmons, Carol Baker, that master of overacting, Charlton Heston, and Oscar-winning Burl Ives.
The Big Country. That was 1958.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and do you know what's funny? When you said Gene Simmons, I immediately pictured Gene Simmons from Kiss.
So do I.
Yeah, not Gene Simmons, the actress, of course, who was just fantastic.
When I hear the name.
I can't remember when I watched that last. That was a long time ago.
I think I watched the last time maybe a year ago.
I'll tell you who else was in it. Chuck Connors.
That's right, yes.
And do you remember that Chuck Connors, the main way that he made his money was he endorsed that toy that was like a toy gun that you could fire a beam and it would shoot tin cans off of a wall. Do you remember that?
Not really, no.
Do you know what? I could probably find the advert for that on YouTube if I could remember the name of it. In fact, I might have a quick look for that. But I mean, tell us the plot of Big Country just very quickly.
Well, essentially, this guy played by Gregory Peck. He's set to marry this woman, so he goes to the ranch owned by her father, and they run into some local toughs. He doesn't want to fight, and it causes a thing where she thinks he's a coward. And then he meets this other woman who owns a ranch, and on that property is the only river in the area. And she lets both ranching families in the area, they're feuding, of course. She allows them both access to the river. And this doesn't go over well with the fiance because Gregory Peck buys that ranch. And he says, well, I plan on still allowing, your competitors to use the river. And she gets all pissed, and basically it all comes down to like a duel between the patriarchs of both families.
Right, got you.
It's cool. I mean, that's one I wish I had seen on the big screen. It has some great vistas. And I mean, that's just an absolute epic Western. You can sit there and just watch it and just absorb it, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I do. I mean, like I said, my 6 key ingredients for a good Western are one of them is the use of locations and cinematography. And for me, that's a vital part of it. I mean, and there's been some low budget Westerns that have tried to sort of film, kind of in a quarry outside of Rome or something like that. And they suffer quite badly compared to the ones that are shot in the actual ranches down in New Mexico. There's that town that's been used. I'm going to mention it later. That specific set that's been used in about, 30, 40 Westerns that I can think of now. And it was actually up for sale. It was a bit beyond my price range. It was about $50 million. But George, if you do move in there, I'll be prepared to come and visit. But you weren't just buying the set, you were buying all the land around it, and there was also like a hotel for actors to stay in with really nice rooms and stables, and I mean you were getting the whole kit and caboodle. But that would be a Yellowstone story of its own. I want to mention Yellowstone in 1883 a bit later, even though we're not doing TV shows. I found that commercial, the toy that Chuck Connors did the adverts for, and I'm pretty sure he probably got a percentage, was called Tin Can Alley. And I think I can probably get away with playing the audio because it's on YouTube anyway. And this was the advert.
Hello, I'm Chuck Connors, and this is Tin Can Alley. An exciting new electronic target game that truly tests your marksmanship from as far away as 25 feet. Nice shooting, Chuck. But Tin Can Alley is safe because...
I love that. It truly tests your marksmanship from distances as far away as 25 feet. Well, if you can't hit a target at 25 feet, I would say your marksmanship is pretty shit. But I never forget that commercial. That was 1977, and it played in. It was heavily advertised in the UK, and I remember at least one kid at our school had a set of it, and you got to cock the rifle with the kind of the breech loading action things. Of course, everybody thought it was cool, and that was just as. I think that came out just as everybody was stopping playing Cowboys and Indians and wanted to play World War II. So its popularity waned fairly quickly. That's someone. Oh God, there's people talking about a party on my Facebook stream. Even though I wanted to. Can you just check you can hear George okay? Is what I was asking them. So fortunately they can hear you. All good. So you're okay. So that was your number 8, wasn't it?
Yes.
My number 8. Let me get back into the StreamYard studio here so I can put my little scrolling banner up. Now, my number 8. Not many people are going to have seen this film. It's got a couple of titles. It's called Sweetwater. It's also been called Sweet Vengeance. It's directed by Logan and Noah Miller. It came out in 2013. It's got a great cast. It stars Ed Harris as the sheriff, Jason Isaacs, who's kind of this sort of prophet stroke priest who also kind of thinks of himself as the law of God, I guess you would say. And then you've got January Jones as the female protagonist, and some great supporting cast actors like Stephen Root and Amy Madigan. Is it one you've seen, George?
I have not seen this one.
Oh, yeah. See, I was hoping I'd get at least one on the list that you haven't seen. Well, it came out with almost kind of no hullabaloo. Does anyone use that word anymore? They do now. And it's got a 6.1 rating on IMDb. I personally would give it an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a fantastic film. Ed Harris's character sort of comes into the territory that's lorded over by Jason Isaacs' character, looking for some lost relatives that Jason Isaacs has murdered. And basically anybody that comes through his area that he doesn't think is godly, he kills them. So, and he's just this really nasty guy. But he also thinks he's completely righteous. So he's a really interesting villain. And that's one of the real strengths about the movie. One of the best scenes, without giving you any spoilers, that will ruin the plot or anything like that, is that Ed Harris is actually, his character is invited to Jason Isaacs' house for dinner. And Isaacs does this big speech about this fantastic new table that he's got, that they're all sitting round, and how expensive the wood was, and that it took a really long time for the wood to arrive from this faraway place. And then he asks the sheriff, Ed Harris's character, to explain exactly why he thinks these missing people would be lost in his territory. And Ed Harris doesn't like him, decides to demonstrate this with his Bowie knife, pulls it out and says, well, let me explain it to you. This is Santa Fe. And he scratches it on the table. This is your land. And he scratches it, this big area on the table. These people traveled from Santa Fe through your land. And we know that they got, we know that their possessions were found here. And he scrapes another massive cross on the guy's table. I've shown that scene at my movie quiz a couple of times. It's really funny. And it's a brilliant scene between two powerhouse actors. I absolutely love Ed Harris. I really like Jason Isaacs. I've met Jason in person a couple of times and chatted to him on the phone when he used to live in the UK. And I made a point of watching everything that he did. Fantastic villain in The Patriot, of course, with Mel Gibson. Well, look, George, that's one for your list to watch. Sweetwater or Sweet Vengeance. You should be able to track it down on one of the streaming services, or probably in the Blu-ray DVD section in Best Buy. Do they still have a disc section there?
I don't know. I haven't been in a Best Buy in a very long time.
Just goes to show how long it is since I've been to the States, eh? Like last time I was over there, they did have a DVD section, and you could pick up older films for only a few bucks.
From what I'm told, it's not really a big section anymore. It's mainly just the new releases. So many people are streaming or buying things on Amazon.
Yeah,
it's worth it to maintain a section like that. I kind of miss it, but at the same time, I like the convenience of just being able to order from home.
Okay, I can understand that. I mean, I'm because I guess I like to constantly reference material, and I like to watch stuff on Blu-ray, and I guess I'm a movie collector. I'm a big believer in physical media. I know that we are rapidly running out of space in our homes, but I am a big believer of physical media, and I do have a copy of that on DVD, which
Cool.
I actually picked it up at the supermarket. It was one of those films where I knew nothing. I'd never seen a trailer, absolutely nothing. It was at the supermarket for like $10 or whatever, probably $5 American. And I thought, Ed Harris, Jason Isaacs, I've never heard of these directors, but those actors are not going to attach themselves to a bad script. They don't need to do a shit film. They're doing all right. They don't need to do a crap film for the money at this stage in their career. How bad can it be? And I was just really surprised that it was so good. So that's a recommendation for the 5 of you watching. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you want to chuck in some titles of your own that are your favorite westerns. Put them in the chat and you'll see if they're on our list. And do check out George's Movie Guy Review 24/7 website. The details are in the text below. He reviews all of his films old school still, not on YouTube. Likes to do it all the old-fashioned way, but very in detailed and fantastic reviews on there. I've just been reading all the James Bond ones. So we're moving on to our number 7 pick. George, what you got?
Silverado by Lance.
That's also on my list, which means we need to talk about it now, but it's in a different place on my list. I'm so glad it made it on your list. That's great. Okay, tell me why you picked it, and I'll talk about it after.
Well, I just think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You get this great set of characters, and you put them in this. It's like an old-fashioned Western, but it's, strictly for the 80s. It's got all the, usual tropes that you expect from the genre, but it just feels kind of fresh in the hands of casting.
Yeah.
The interplay between the characters is really good, and it's got an amazing cast. Brian Dennehy is the bad guy. Come on.
Oh, God rest his soul. One of his best ever performances, I would argue.
Totally.
Yeah. Really, really good performance. I'm running out of deputies.
It has Brian James in it.
Yes, it does. Also has Kevin Costner in his breakout role. I mean, that's not his very first role, but it was the role that got him noticed. He shot Silverado right after doing Fandango. And I think it was also the film that kind of gave him an affinity for Westerns and the genre and the period.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, I loved him in it. He really stood out. He made a lot of his role. He probably had the smallest role of the 4 leads. Yeah, I mean, this is on my list as well. We don't want to double up the chat about it, so I'll talk about it now. I mean, you're right. It came out at a time when Westerns were completely unfashionable. By the 80s, no one really wanted to see Westerns. No one was going to watch Westerns in the cinema. They kind of, the last of them really died out in the 70s, and it was more sort of action films, thrillers, comedies, and your Tom Hanks and Steve Guttenberg movies and this kind of thing, Ghostbusters and so on. And in the 80s is not a decade that's known for its Westerns. You've got very few Westerns that were released in the 80s, and Silverado was a deliberate attempt by Kasdan to include all the elements that made a Western great, as you said, but revitalize them and make them fresh and fun. And the movie is fun. The characters are lovely. They've all got fantastic arcs, from Danny Glover as Mal, the African-American returning to his homestead to find his family home burned. Scott Glenn and Kevin Costner as Jake and Emmett, the brothers who are coming to see their sister who's starting a farm with her husband. And then you've got Kevin Kline, who is kind of a bit of a wanderer and becomes a reluctant sheriff as Payden, who I met in person and got to tell him what a fantastic film I thought this was when he went to see Brian Dennehy in London in The Death of a Salesman. I had a friend in that show, and I was waiting for the friend at the stage door, and who came out of the stage door but Kevin Kline, who'd been in to see Brian Dennehy. And I got to talk to him about Silverado. I'll tell you another thing I love about Silverado is the soundtrack.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
I forget it, but I should pull that up.
It was. I can tell you now because I've got the soundtrack on vinyl, and I was going to bring it out for the show, but it's in the shed with all my other vinyls. It was composed by Bruce Brofton, who also did the score for Young Sherlock Holmes, and he was on a bit of a high in the mid-80s. He was getting quite a lot of scores. It's got a very traditional Western vibe, the score, that. Forgive me, people watching at home, that'll make you laugh for a minute. But it has got that old school Western music feel, but it's also just a great. It really enriches the film, and one of the reasons this film is so special to me is it was the first movie that I saw in Leicester Square, the first Western I ever saw on the big screen, and the first film I ever saw in surround sound. It wasn't THX, that came out a little bit later. I think it came out the next year, but it was a really good sound system, and I'd never seen a movie with gunfights in a cinema with a sound system like that. Because this is back in the day when the local cinemas didn't have sound systems like the ones in the central London. And that opening scene with the ambush and the bullets punching through the ceiling, they went all around the auditorium. It was just unbelievable. What a great movie. Yeah, I really, really like Silverado. Can't recommend it highly enough to anyone watching who hasn't watched it. Anything else to add about that film before we move on?
Interestingly enough, it came out the same summer as Clint Eastwood's Pale Rider. I saw them both in the cinema.
Yeah.
And, I really loved them both. Pale Rider almost made my list.
Yeah.
I bumped that in the favor of another Clint Eastwood movie, which will be my sixth choice, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, don't mention that now. Pale Rider is a good movie. That I probably wouldn't put that in my top 20. I think it might be in my top 30, but and it came out in the UK after Silverado. It came out, I think, about 6 months later. And funnily enough, I was going to say that and Pale Rider were really the only two Westerns I can remember getting a cinema release in the UK in the 80s, apart from Quigley Down Under, which was an Australian Western. And that only got a release for 1 week in central London. It did not get a national release.
It didn't last very long here in the States either. It didn't break box office records. So
big shame.
That's a good movie. I really like it.
Yeah, it's very underrated, and I mean that's the thing about doing this stream is, I really do hope that people watching it, that they'll be introduced to some films that they haven't seen before. Now, my number 7 pick before we get on to number 6 is, funny enough, Kevin Costner, who first starred in Silverado, his first Western. He would go on to direct many a Western later in his life, but my particular favorite of his is Open Range from 2003. I take it you're going to have seen that, George, aren't you?
I did see that. It's very good.
Yeah, it's quite a long movie, but for me, I mean, it's a buddy movie in a way, and it's about I guess you call them a group of cowboys in a loose term, taking some cattle across country, and they pass one particular town where the guy doesn't like people running cattle through their territory. He calls them free grazers. Brilliant villain played by Michael Gambon. You've got a fantastic supporting cast in the film. I mean, Robert Duvall is Kevin Costner's sort of older buddy in the movie, and they don't know his real name. He's never told him his real name, and that doesn't come out until right before the gunfight at the end, which is quite a funny moment. You got very young Diego Luna in there, Annette Bening, Michael Jeter, who I think is in probably one of his last roles. Yeah, I believe it was his last film before he passed away in 2003 of an HIV-related illness, which was a real shame. James Russo is also in there. He's another actor I really like, supporting actor, thankfully still around. And the film also introduces us to a very young Kim Coates, who I'm hoping to get on the channel. I have asked him to come on because I have spoken to him before, but I've only just asked him to come on, who's one of the leads in the fantastic Sons of Anarchy.
And Kim Coates, he was also in The Last Boy Scout with Bruce Willis.
He was indeed. That's also one of his early roles. And he's just a brilliant actor. And what's even greater is he's a lovely guy. I contacted him on Twitter because I'm a big Sons of Anarchy fan, and just let him know I really wanted to work with him at some point, and he was nice enough to respond to me. And I mean, you know, you could tell I knew his work really well, and just that's always really refreshing when people take the time to do that. I mean, one thing I want to mention about Open Range is it's got one of the best, for me, one of the best climactic gunfights in a Western that I've ever seen. That climactic scene's been shown at my movie quiz, I think, more than once, that I do every year. I just think it's a cracking movie all round. If you haven't seen it, that's definitely one for your watch list. Let's move on to our number 6 choice. And I think you said your number 6 might have... Oh, well, actually, just tell us what it is.
Well, let me preface this by saying that I love Clint Eastwood. He's like my favorite actor, tied up there with Jack Nicholson. But Clint Eastwood, for me, he's total badass, and I pretty much would like any Western he was in. So it's like I didn't want to fill my whole list with nothing but Clint Eastwood.
No.
Now, I should mention that later on in the list, there'll be another Clint Eastwood thing that kind of has to be there.
I've got 2 Clint Eastwood movies in my list, and I bet that you and I have got the same 2. But go on.
But in any event, I whittled it down, and I finally decided that the one I'm going to make at number 6 is High Plains Drifter.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought you were going to say a different one, but okay.
I was going to say Unforgiven, and while they probably should be on the list, I figured, you know what? Everybody would probably pick it. It's brilliant, but maybe I'm going to go with something maybe a little older that not everybody would pick.
Yeah.
I went with High Plains Drifter. It was not too long ago I rewatched that, and I inflicted it on my poor wife. Too dark for her, but it's amazing. Like, kind of like in the same vein of Pale Rider. He's the stranger that rides into town.
Yeah.
He doesn't have good intentions. He has some evil in mind, and well, like in Pale Rider, it's implied that maybe he might possibly be a ghost. No spoilers.
Yeah. And I'm right. Again, it's one that I've not watched recently, but I'm right in thinking that's the one where he gets everybody to paint the town red, isn't it?
That's the one.
Yeah. Yeah. The implication is that either the town or some people connected to the town or some people that visit the town regularly did him wrong in the past, and he's kind of come back for vengeance. But
that's exactly right.
Is it him or is it something else? You know.
It should also be mentioned that if you want to see High Plains Drifter, you might want to do it pretty quickly, because I have a sickening feeling that that's going to be one of the picked movies from the past that gets canceled.
Because of what? Just because of the current political narrative?
Because of the rape.
Oh shit! Yeah, God, I forgot about that.
It was pretty brutal.
Yeah. That's but I mean, okay. I mean, if we're talking about those kinds of scenes, I can think of worse sexual assault scenes in other films.
Oh, absolutely. It just clicked into my head as I was watching.
Yeah. I mean, listen. Yeah, the film is not an easy watch, and that's another one that I saw. I saw it more than once. I saw it when I was quite young, because at some point I got a black and white TV up in my room. And what was great about that TV, right, was you could turn down the brightness without switching it off. Because if you remember old black and whites, they take about 5 minutes to come on. But this one was great. The brightness thing, you could turn it down so far that the TV looked like it was off. So if I wanted to watch something naughty like Stephen King's Carrie and stay up without my parents watching, I'd pretend to be asleep and turn the lights out, put the volume on really low because you didn't have headphones back then. And then if I heard my mum coming up the stairs, I'd turn the brightness down and pretend the TV was off and just go. And that was one of the movies I did that for. But they knew that I was watching it. I think it was just because I was embarrassed by the level of violence in it. So I kind of pretended I'd turned it off. But that film was really disturbing.
It was. And like I said, when I was watching it last year, it just hit me when that scene came on. It's like, I think cancel culture might have a few words to say about this one. Once they realize it exists, they're going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
But I think this political, maybe I shouldn't have said that at all.
No. Listen, you're cancelling yourself if you do that. Don't self-censor yourself on my... I'm never going to have any of my guests self-censor themselves on this channel. That's an absolute no-no. You know, I mean, if you say sweaty titty bollocks, we might have to bleep it out or something. But I have a real issue with cancel culture, because even if you think a film was wrong, or when it was made in the time it was out there, or it was challenging certain perceptions or going against the norm, or it was just plain offensive, we can't be stripping those things from the historical timeline, because that's basically a form of censorship. And
burning books a la World War II.
Exactly. It's the same thing. And anybody that tells you any different, it's a nonsense. I mean, we had a big campaign in the 80s, which was called the Video Nasty campaign, led by this woman, Mary Whitehouse.
Oh, God, yeah. You guys had so many horror movies that were on that band list.
Yeah, Suspiria and Demons and The Last House on the Left. And a lot of these now are actually considered cult classics. And although some of them have still got, you know, really disturbing scenes like Cannibal Holocaust and everything, that whole genre of Italian horror, for example, is a sort of revered by many filmmakers. And I mean, look at Quentin Tarantino. He was inspired by God knows how many films on that banned list. So
Italian horror movies, they're so gruesome.
Yeah,
we are tough subjects here.
Yeah, well, we're jumping the shark a little bit, but I'm not a fan of cancel culture. High Plains Drifter wouldn't have made it on my list. I think mainly because, like I said, I've picked films that I want to watch again, and I don't want to watch that film. I think I probably do want to watch it one more time, and maybe that'll be the only time. But you know, we'll see. Well, my number 6 also has Clint Eastwood in it. This might be on your list somewhere else. If it is, you can tell me, but don't tell me where it is. It's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, directed by Sergio Leone, 1966.
And music by the maestro himself, Ennio Morricone.
Ennio, yeah, I think it's pronounced Ennio Morricone, isn't it? Is it?
I'm actually not sure. I don't think I've ever heard it spoken out loud, so I'm not really sure.
I was supposed to go to a concert of his. I mean, he sadly passed away now. And I was supposed to go to a concert of his that sadly he had to cancel because he was ill, and then he died about a year after that. And I recall a newscaster saying it was Ennio Morricone, but that doesn't mean that they were correct. So yeah, well, let's talk about that. I mean, that's one of the 3 of a trilogy called the Man with No Name trilogy, which really Clint Eastwood kind of left Hollywood for a little bit, went away and made a load of Italian movies that were a huge success in Europe. They weren't massive hits in America, but not then anyway. They were huge hits in Europe, particularly in Italy. The whole Italian spaghetti Western genre, as you say, it's a subgenre within Westerns. And then came back and, you know, then he started getting cast in Dirty Harry and Magnum Force and all that stuff. But they really did, they lit a fire under his career. And now, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I picked it because of the 3. I think it's the best of that trilogy. It's got the best characters. It's got fantastic, just sort of so many moments, you know, with the watch and like you say, and of course the music in it and so on. I mean, it's on your list elsewhere, I believe. Don't tell us where for now.
It's high enough, but we'll get to that.
Sure. 8.8 on IMDb. Eli Wallach's well, kind of. I mean, there's all these anti-heroes in it, really, aren't there? I mean, I know you got the sort of the guy that breaks out of the prison and all that stuff, but Eli Wallach and Lee Van Cleef are also kind of bad guys as well. What for you? What are the things that gets this on the list for you?
Well, okay, so in its subgenre of spaghetti westerns, it's kind of like the Gone with the Wind, I guess you could say. I mean, it was a huge movie. It had three great lead actors, Clint Eastwood, Lee Van Cleef, and Eli Wallach, and it was just amazing. I love Sergio Leone's visual style. That's one of the things that really attracts me to all his movies. And I hate to be repeating myself, but it was that score by Ennio. I mean, my God,
Yeah,
just chills. In any movie he's done, the score, his music sends chills. He is amazing. So yes, good, bad, and ugly, awesome, pure awesomeness.
I forgot that. I think it's near the beginning of the movie, and I have watched it. I think I watched it about 2 years ago. I'm right in thinking there's a massive action scene from the American Civil War. Is that right?
I believe you are right.
I think it's to do with the past of one of the characters, and there's a big battle. There's trenches. You got a whole load of Union soldiers, and
I think you're right. It was about a year ago I rewatched this. I was going through my old reviews that I had written in the past and realized that some of the early ones I wrote, well, were basically crap. I can't believe I actually wrote those. I was an English major in college. And I'm like, if I turned this into a class, I'd have been kicked out. So it's like I went back and rewatched a bunch of things so I could revise the reviews, make them actually sound decent. And The Man with No Name trilogy were three of the films. And yes, that was one Sunday that will live with my wife in infamy. They were on all day, and she's like, after I think the third one was over, I was like, can we watch something funny now, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny as well because tonally, you know, with our choices, with our list here, tonally, even within the Western genre, you've got a very, very wide range of tones within that genre. I mean, Silverado is a fun film. There's many comical moments, but there's also a lot of pathos and drama, particularly with Danny Glover's storyline and real moments of gripping sort of cliffhanger action. But it always comes back to it all circles round to fun pretty quickly. But you know, and then The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is completely tonally is also fun, but completely tonally different to Silverado. It's got a unique style all of its own, and you can see that style repeated in Quentin Tarantino's work, certainly.
He does. He is a fan of Leone.
Oh yeah.
I had an interview with him once, and he said he was really obsessed with those shots of the eyes.
Oh yes, the close-ups.
And I think he said he incorporated that sort of in the Kill Bill movies.
Yes, that's right. Well, there's a massive nod to Once Upon a Time in the West. Don't tell me if it's on your list. In the garden scene in the Lotus Garden after the fight in the cafe with that sort of wooden bird thing that's doing the thing with the water, and you keep hearing that da-dunk, da-dunk. And that's a take on the opening of Once Upon a Time in the West, where you've got that
water on Woody Strode's face.
It's the whole thing at the beginning of the opening at the train station, where that scene goes on for a really long time, and then the three guys finally get off, and that it's all in that lead up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a good, really good scene. In both movies, actually. I really like. I rewatched all of Tarantino's films recently, and you see where he gets his inspiration from, and I think his big skill is being inspired by what other filmmakers have done, and then crafting that into his own thing, and doing something with it and taking it further, or making it work in another genre. And he's brilliant at doing that and combining those things with his own original ideas. Some people say I look like him, but we're going to come on to that later. I want to give a shout out to the actress Cello Alonso, actually, who passed away in 2019. Quite sad to read that. I didn't know she died just before the pandemic. She was the sort of female love interest in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and she stopped acting in the 60s. So I'm guessing she must have married some rich Italian businessman around that time, or just decided to give up acting. But she did a lot of sword and sandal epics with those kinds of Italian films. You know, The Pirate and the Slave Girl, that kind of thing. Goliath and the Barbarians, and Terror of the Red Mask. But I remember the shots of her in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and thinking, God, that's a beautiful woman, right there.
He was good looking, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and lived to a ripe old age of 85. So good on you, Cello. So that was my number. That was 6 we were at, weren't we?
Yes.
That was The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for me. And what was your one again? Just refresh my memory.
Texas High Plains Drifter.
Of course it was. The Good. I got a million things racing through my head here. It would be really good if I had a producer working on this with me. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I'm just going to update this list as we go. I did actually had a write and whiteboard, but I'm not going to bother with that today. Just get this straight on the stream. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and High Plains Drifter, of course. Such a good movie, but not one to watch with your kids. For those people watching at home, if you're thinking about what Western should I introduce my kids to the genre with, the answer to that is Silverado, not High Plains Drifter. So what's your number 5 pick?
Well, to introduce kids to Westerns, why not choose the one that introduced me to Westerns? That would be the Apple Dumpling Gang.
The Apple Dumpling Gang. That's Disney, isn't it?
That's Disney. Don Knotts and Tim Conway.
Yeah. God, I remember that. That was another one that was shown on The Wonderful World of Disney and in Technicolor, blah blah. Saturday night. Look at the Castle.
That was my number 1 Western of all time.
Well, you can tell me that when we get to number 1, but I don't believe you. Right?
Yes, I'm kidding again, Star.
No, I can tell you're kidding. That's why I said I don't believe you. So number 5, what you got for number 5?
Seriously, and this is serious. Number 5 is The Searchers, John Wayne.
Okay, now I was told by my good friend Paul Woody, who does a fantastic YouTube channel called War History Online. It's really great, very detailed. He said, if The Searchers isn't on there, I won't be able to take the list seriously. Now, you talk about why The Searchers is on there, and I'm going to tell you then what it means to me.
I'm sorry, Lance. I was stepping away for a minute to get the dog something.
Oh, that's all right. Well, I can chip in for a bit if you need to deal with the dog for a second.
I already got her food. She wanted a little something to eat. She's good. I just didn't hear your question. That's all.
No, I was going to say, I mean, The Searchers is an interesting one because it's considered a real definitive classic of the Western genre. Everybody talks about The Searchers. You'll always find it on any top 10 Guardian critic list, or on IMDb or whatever. But I've got an interesting relationship with that film that's a bit different. You tell me what it means to you and why it's on your list.
Well, in the latter half of the 90s, I kind of started catching up on all the classic films that I hadn't yet seen. Throughout my 20s and my teens, I guess I didn't watch a lot of older films. I always just preferred the newer ones, but I decided to expand my horizons and start catching up, as it were. And one of the first films that I decided to watch was The Searchers, because I had heard a number of good things about it. And I really hadn't seen too many John Wayne films at that point. I believe the only one I might have seen by that point was The Shootist.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched The Searchers, and I was just captivated. I mean, here is a dark story. This war vet goes looking for his abducted niece, spends years and years and years doing this. And I mean, it's just an amazing picture. Like I said, I was absolutely captivated. I taped it off cable and watched it, and it was just something else. It was something to see.
Great stuff. I'm right in thinking, and again, the last time I watched it was probably about 7 years ago, because I have got the DVD. I bought it probably about 10, 12 years ago, and I stuck it on then. I'm right in thinking that the beginning of it is like a homestead being attacked by Indians, and you see the girl getting taken. Is that right?
I believe you are correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Natalie Wood.
So, right, that's right. Yeah, you got a young. Yeah, and she's quite young. See, now the story with this film for me is this: that movie was on the telly. I was quite young. Remember that scene well, and I remember like, oh my god, you know how they're going to rescue the woman and blah 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 blah. And then the first time it was on, it might not have been the first time it was on, but the first time it was on that I got to see it, it was on in the evening. I was quite young. I must have been about 6 or 7. And suddenly my mum was like, it's past 8 o'clock. You have to go to bed. And I was like, I haven't finished. The film's not finished yet. So I got sent up to bed and I didn't know what the ending was. And I must have asked my dad the following day what the ending was. The other film that I got sent up to bed and didn't get to see the ending of was the Yakuza with Gregory Peck, which came out, I think it was in 73. That was another big Barney in the house. And so it didn't have that impact on me when I saw it the first time because I didn't get to see the whole movie. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then I didn't see it again until, I mean, everybody was always talking about it, but it was never on. And I was like, the video shop didn't have it because it was like an old movie. So it wasn't until I started collecting Westerns on DVD and now Blu-ray, of course, that I thought, I've got to add the Searchers. And I watched it about 12 years ago. And this is me really watching it properly for the first time after I've seen all these other films that I really love, that I have a much more pleasant, ingratiated memory of. So for this reason, it didn't have the impact on me that it might have had on some other people. It's like if I'd seen Star Wars after I'd seen 40 other sci-fi movies first at the cinema with better technology and cameras, Star Wars might not have had the same impact on me as seeing it in 77. So for that reason, The Searchers, whilst being in my top 20, is not in my top 10. Sorry, Paul, but it is on our mutual top 10 list with our guest. So you have saved me, George. Well done. I was hoping you were going to have it on there. Yeah, I mean, it's got a cracking cast. I mean, when was the last time you watched it? Do you think it still holds up?
I can't even remember the last time I watched it. Now that we're talking about it, I might actually have to give it a rewatch within the next few weeks.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm going to give it a rewatch as well. I'm just going to kind of, because, my opinion about films 15 years ago is also not the same as my opinion now. I've watched some films recently that I hadn't watched in a long time, like another one that didn't make my list, but I watched it because I wanted to see if it should be on the list, was Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp. And I have to say that I really enjoyed it. But when I went to see it at the cinema, it suffered by comparison to another movie that we might get onto later. And I didn't enjoy it as much. I appreciated it a lot more now for what it was. And so that was a film that's my opinion has changed over the years. My number 5 pick is The Hateful Eight, 2015. Directed by, as you can see on the graphic scrolling on the screen, Lance lookalike Quentin Tarantino. So I get told this all the time. At least once a year, I'll meet someone in the film industry and they'll go, do you know who you remind me of? And I'm like, Quentin Tarantino? Yes, how did you know I was going to say that? It's the chin, you see. It's the chin.
I can see it, yeah.
Oh, thanks, man. Never heard that before. If only I had both his talent and his money. And I've met him twice. at the UK premiere of Reservoir Dogs and at the UK premiere of Pulp Fiction in Nottingham. Was the second time, and he was all right. He was all right. He had time for you, you know. He was all right. He was decent guy. Yeah, I watched The Hateful Eight and Django again recently, the Tarantino version. I think they're both brilliantly made films. Django's a bit out there, might be a bit too much for some people, but I still really love it. I think it's great. But what I liked about The Hateful Eight, even though I was disappointed when I first watched The Hateful Eight, because I wanted it. I thought Quentin was going to give us this big epic action movie, and then you got these brilliant shots at the beginning, and it's all in the snow and the mountains, and we're kind of isolated, and it sets everything up. And then the rest of the film takes place in this little house, and I was like, oh. But you know, that's a film that I've rewatched 2 or 3 times now, and every time I watch it, it gets better. And the performances are all fantastic. The script's amazing. I like the way it's shot with those low angles, and he used I think I'm right in thinking it was all shot in 70mm, wasn't it?
It was. I saw it at the cinema in 70mm with the roadshow for presentation,
which was a longer. That was a longer cut as well.
I believe it was.
Yeah,
and it was incredible.
Yeah, and I think it had like a little video from Quentin at the beginning, didn't it? And
I don't recall.
Right. Yeah, but it was. You see, that's the only film of Tarantino's that I've not seen at the cinema. Was The Hateful Eight, and at least I don't think we did. It was either that or Django, one or the other. I didn't see on the big screen, and I can't remember which. And people,
I've seen every one of Quentin's movies at the cinema.
I've seen all of them, but one of those, and I know it's one of those that I didn't. But I really liked it. One of Kurt Russell's finest performances. I just like all the characters, even the small characters in it are really interesting. I like the twist with the suddenly we go back in time and we see what happened before. It's a bit of an old device, but it really works. Beautifully shot, great use of camera angles. Who would have thought that a film 90% of which is set inside a house could be so gripping? But he did the same thing with Reservoir Dogs, and yeah. So you approve it? You do like The Hateful Eight?
Very much.
Brilliant. Well, let's move on to number 4. Cracking on here. We're cracking on through these. If there were 3 of us, I think it would take a lot longer. What's your number 4 pick?
The Wild Bunch, Sam Peckinpah.
Now I'm going to tell you that is also on my list. So it's not at number 4, and it hasn't come yet, so it's higher up on my list. It's actually I'm going to tell you actually because it's pretty close. It's my number 3. So yeah. My number 4 is a different film, but my number 3 is also The Wild Bunch. So yeah, talk to us about that.
Well, I think it kind of redefined the genre. Yeah, we had all those Italian spaghetti westerns, but this one really brought forth the violence. When it was released in '69, people were up in arms. How could this be so violent? And it's a good movie. Peckinpah really knows how to make a manly kind of action macho picture. It's got a great cast with William Holden, Ernest Borgnine. Who else is that? Robert Ryan, I believe, was in it.
Yeah, he was. He played the leader.
Ben Johnson, Strother Martin, L.Q. Jones, Bo Hopkins, Alfonso Aru. And Alfonso Aru, a Mexican actor. It's interesting, his role there. Jump forward to 1986 or Three Amigos. He's in that too. It's a total goof on his role in The Wild Bunch.
Yeah. And that actually one of the guys that's also in it who's still alive and he's like a proper cowboy, I think in real life too.
L.Q. Jones?
Yeah, you knew who I was going to talk about. Yeah. And I mean, he's always played these really small roles, but he's got this great voice. It's like, it's a bit like Sam Elliott, who is the king of the Cowboys voices. But yeah, and I mean, he normally plays like little bad guys or sheriffs, and he's been in, he's done all the things like Charlie's Angels and The Incredible Hulk and all those 80s and 70s shows, Columbo, Chips, all that stuff. But he's done tons of Westerns. He was in Gunsmoke for the best part of 10 years. The Virginian, that was another big Western. I mean, we could do another stream on Western TV shows. And again, I don't let me end this stream without talking about Yellowstone in 1883, because I actually tagged them in a post and I said I was going to talk about them, and I am. But yeah, I mean, he's a great little actor, and he's still alive. I mean, it would have been, if I'd known that. Do you know what? I would have tried to get him on for this. That would have been fun, wouldn't it? Bo Hopkins, yeah. I mean, he's another one that was in. He's still alive too, man. He's still alive. God, yeah. Remember him? He kind of, he's one of those actors that like looked the same age for about 40 years. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Bo, whose moisturizer are you using, and where can I get some of that? Yeah. I mean, the Wild Bunch for me. Now, this is an interesting one because you got this. Don't want to spoil it for any of the young people that might watch this at some other stage. If you haven't seen the Wild Bunch, you've got to watch it. Around the early 2000s, there was a recutting and a redigitizing of the original negative, and I think the film was slightly recut. I remember seeing it when I was a kid, because I remember the scene with the machine gun at the end, which I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. That's a bit of an iconic moment. So when it was on the cinema, because I'm a massive Sam Peckinpah fan, I even like Convoy, which is considered to be his worst movie. I love it. I thought I've got to go and see it on the big screen, and I saw it at a really good cinema, really big screen, and it starts with a bank heist, and I love the way that bank heist is intercut with the opening titles. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
And they kind of introduce each character with a freeze, and you got credits that come up, and they sort of freeze in a black and white still, and you can see that. That's another thing that Tarantino was influenced by, I think, with one of his movies. It's a good movie. I mean, like all the heroes in it are anti-heroes, really, and they're men that are kind of out of time in more ways than one. Is that a fair comment about that story?
Yeah, at 1913, the Old West was basically dead. You got people riding around in motor cars,
yeah,
machine gun, and these guys were just totally out of place. I mean, their day was gone, and they were just trying to have one last hurrah, and it went.
Yeah, and I mean, well, they got to have it in more ways than one. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna, it's probably got, I would imagine, of all the westerns ever made, more people probably get killed in that film than any other western. I'm going to hedge a bet that's got to be the case.
I think you're right.
Yeah, maybe the original Django, he's running around with a machine gun with endless ammo, killing 30 people in every scene. But I still think this technically might top that. But because killing the same 30 people in every scene doesn't count. But yeah, really good movie. It's also got William Holden, who many people might remember was the hotel owner in The Towering Inferno. He's another actor that I really, really like. Great commanding presence on screen. He always had a fantastic, he's pretty similar in a lot of the roles he played, but God, he could command the screen. You mentioned Ben Johnson as well, who sadly passed away in 1996. He was a great actor, and I met him when I was in Arizona in I think it was 88, the first time I went there, and there was somebody queuing up behind me, and I turned around and I recognized that voice because Ben Johnson had a very distinctive cowboy growling voice, and he was like queuing up behind me in some store. I think it was a bookstore, and then and he had a cowboy hat on as well, and I kind of smiled at him, and he sort of tilted his hat at me like that, and I thought, I know that guy from somewhere. There was no Google back then, but it wasn't until quite some time later, and I was watching a movie. I was like, that's him. That's him. That's the guy I saw in the store. Yeah. So Sam Peckinpah, the man who introduced slow motion action, by the way, to the cinema. Full stop. You'll see a lot of it in that. So that was your number 4 pick. George. My number 4 pick is Tombstone.
I knew that was going to come up.
Yeah, well, it's a big fave for a lot of people. Now, I have to say that if it wasn't for the performances of 3 or 4 of the actors, I don't know that it would be there. It was we talked about it actually when I first mentioned this stream to you, and it was a film with a lot of production issues, and you can see on my little thing scrolling across the screen there, if you go on IMDb, it will tell you it was directed by George P. Cosmatos, but he had a massive alcohol problem at the time, and half the time didn't get up in time to get on set to shoot the first shot. So Kurt Russell very much took over the production and actually was really the guy that got that film completed. But the outstanding performance in that film has to go to Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday. Yeah, do you agree, George?
I do. Val Kilmer was amazing in it. I mean, here's a guy who in the 80s, he was in those silly-ass comedies, Top Secret, Real Genius.
Yeah.
What was that, Top Gun? But in 91, he proved himself a serious actor when he became Jim Morrison in The Doors. It wasn't a performance. He became Jim Morrison. It was eerie. And he became an actor to watch, and I felt he did the same thing with Doc Holliday in Tombstone. I mean, it was like, whoa, you hardly recognize that silly guy from Real Genius.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a massive fan of the Doors movie. I think it's because I'm not a fan of the Doors. I'm sorry to say that for anyone who is. I mean, they just weren't the music of my era, and I was into different music at when they were first kind of stuck in front of me, and it didn't really sit with me. I've rewatched that movie since, and I can appreciate it. You're right; he's amazing in it. And then he went from doing that character to this amazing performance of Doc Holliday with that iconic scene, which has also made my movie quiz many a time, where he does the thing with the cup. Do you remember that? The cup with Michael Biehn. Like Michael Biehn is playing, or do you pronounce it Michael Biehn, is playing Johnny Ringo in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And he shows off his gun skills, and he's doing all that stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah, I remember.
And then,
awesome.
and then Val Kilmer picks up the tiny cup off the counter, and he does the same thing with the cup around his finger, and sort of copies his exact moves, but does it even faster, and then puts the cup down and says, "So what? You can twirl your gun quickly." And yeah, I just thought that was brilliant, and I've watched the Val Kilmer documentary, and he didn't cover it. I'd love to know if that was in the script or if Val Kilmer came up with that idea and said, "Wouldn't it be funny if I did it with the cup instead of the gun?" I wonder if that was his idea, because it seems like the sort of thing that might not have been in the script originally. But maybe Kurt Russell. When I get Kurt Russell on the stream, who apparently, by the way, is an absolutely lovely guy. When I get him on the stream, that'd be good to ask him. I mean, you've got a whole tranche of actors in that film as well, who I consider sort of classic cowboys. Sam Elliott, not many actors have got a Twitter account of their own and a Twitter account for the moustache. But Sam Elliott does have a moustache Twitter account. Just go onto Twitter. You can look it up. Sam Elliott's moustache. He's brilliant in Tombstone. He underplays the role and he does it superbly. And he could have tried to scene steal, and he doesn't need to. Kurt Russell, as I said, fantastic. Bill Paxton, God rest his soul, really good in it. Great contrast to the others. You got a cameo by Charlton Heston himself. Jason Peasley makes a nice cameo. Stephen Lang is great as Ike Clanton. He's most people will know him as the villain in Avatar, the military general character. I forget the character's name. He's really good as Ike Clanton. You can look out for a really young Thomas Hayden Church as Billy Clanton in it. You got Michael Rooker as well. So it's a fantastic cast. You know, Joanna Pacula, and then some of the old cowboy sort of bit part actors all turn up in little roles as well. Great action, really well photographed. It's the same town as Silverado. So the set for Tombstone is the same town as Silverado. And if you look at the set when you're watching Tombstone, if you watch Silverado and Tombstone side by side, you can see that the set has grown because they gradually added buildings to it over the years, added bits and pieces. And that's that same one in the ranch. I think it's New Mexico. I also believe that one of my previous picks, Sweetwater, was also shot there. So there's quite a few that were shot there. So Tombstone, great stuff. Was that on your list as well?
No, it did not make my list.
Oh, well, it's good.
Honorable.
Good stuff. So, we get down to number 3, and we already know what my number 3 was, which was The Wild Bunch. What is your number 3?
He rode a blazing saddle.
You see, you asked me if that could be in. I remember you asking me that question. And although I'd said no cross genres, I was prepared to let that one pass. Because apart from the last 15 minutes, which makes the film, in my argument, it is a Western, has to be said.
It just doesn't. It doesn't just spoof the genre; it subverts it.
Yeah, true.
It is a brilliant movie. Now, some 15, 20 years ago, I used to work the overnight crew at some shopping warehouse club, and the subject came up, and somebody called it a racist film. And I was like, okay, I have to take a different opinion. Yes, the N-word is used frequently, but Mel Brooks gets away with it because of the fact that he's Jewish, and the Jews were enslaved thousands of years before the Africans.
Yeah.
But that aside, the movie isn't racist. He's making fun of racists. He's showing it, look at these bigots, they're idiots. It's the black guy that's the smart one. He's the one that saves everybody.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. And actually, if you go onto YouTube, there's a couple of black guys who've got a channel, and one of the things that they do on their channel, and I forget their names, and I'd love to give them a shout out because I've watched quite a few of their videos, but I honestly can't remember that. See, if I should have had that ready, but they've done a video where it's like watching Blazing Saddles for the first time, and they film their live reaction to the introduction of the character in question. Remind me of the name of the actor that plays him.
Cleavon Little.
That's right, Cleavon Little. And and Gene Wilder, God rest his soul, is the supporting cast.
I think they call him.
Yeah, and he's so fast on the draw that you never see him draw.
Did you know that John Wayne was originally approached by Mel Brooks to play the Waco Kid?
No, really?
So what happened was this. Mel Brooks, gave the script to John Wayne and said, I'd love you to be in my movie. This would be working great. So John read the script and he turned it down because it had too much bad language. But he told him, I'll be first in line to see it. I laughed my head off. That was funny, but I can't be in your movie.
Yeah, he was. I mean, John Wayne was quite a conservative guy in, every area of his life.
But just thinking about that, John Wayne in that movie, wow, that's like mind blowing.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think it would have been better if it would have been better if John Wayne had maybe, because he never played a villain from what I can remember. I can't remember him ever playing a villain in a Western.
Villain.
No,
he played some not so nice characters.
Yeah, anti-heroes, but he didn't. I don't think in his career he played a traditional villain.
I don't believe he did.
It would have been great if in that movie he'd played a villain. You see, because in that movie he could have taken that risk. And yeah, when was that made? 78?
74.
Oh.
I got to see it on the big screen in 1981 when it was re-released. My parents, who also liked the movie, took me and my little brother to see it.
Right.
I was 18, which means my brother was about 8 at that point. And I thought it was hilarious. Even though I didn't get all the references to stuff, I just thought the whole idea was hilarious of these stupid white people just acting like idiots while the black guy's trying to save them.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
The scene that really floored me was the opening scene at the railroad track when, what's his name? Claude Ennis Starrett Jr., I think his name is.
I'll look him up.
Claude Ennis something. He told the guys to sing him a good old-fashioned N-word song. And so they start singing some ditty, I Get a Belt Out of You or something.
Yeah, I remember.
Campaign. And he's like, no, I mean this. And all the white guys are dancing around singing Camptown Ladies while the black guys are standing there laughing at them. And that just broke me up.
Do you know what? I did not know that Cleavon Little, who played the black sheriff, died so young in 1992 of colon cancer.
He did. It's very sad.
Yeah. Damn, man. That is sad.
He's supposed to play his role, but he decided just to stick with the writing and co-writing the script.
Right.
So it would have actually been the first collaboration of Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder, on-screen collaboration, that is.
Yeah, I mean, my first memory of that film is a load of people talking about it, and it was one of those movies that was. Do you know what? I have a feeling. I mean, I could be completely wrong. I think it was scheduled against the Poseidon Adventure. And, comedy Western against ship turning over, I thought, I want to watch the Poseidon Adventure. So, but then I remembered all the kids at school the next day talking about this scene of everybody farting around the campfire,
Classic.
Everybody's eating the beans. And of course, yeah, well, beans, good for the heart. The more you eat, the more you go. So, yeah, I mean, and I thought, shit, did I miss something here? Everyone's talking about this movie, like how great it was. I think that and another movie called The Big Bus, which was a bit of a spoof, both showed around the same holiday time, because that was another movie I didn't catch the first time.
1976, a goof on disaster movie.
Yeah,
that's a fun movie. It's
a bit like Airplane, and the bus on the outside looks like a regular coach. On the inside, it's the size of a football field with lots of different levels and a lift and a hotel. Yeah, I mean, so when I got to see Blazing Saddles, it was when it was released on VHS, and we rented it out. You go and rent two films out at the video shop, and yeah, I thought it was very funny. And then I watched it again, I think sometime in the late 90s, and I didn't think it was as funny. Then I bought it on DVD and I watched it again, and I think by then I was a director and I looked at it with different eyes, and I thought, actually, this film, especially when you consider when it was made, was really, really clever. And I think you're right in the sense that Mel Brooks made a really good stand on racism, completely disguising it as comedy, and therefore got away with it. And I you know, I mean, obviously people will have a different reaction to those scenes, but my friends of that demographic who've watched the whole movie have actually really liked it. I think some bits of it haven't aged that well, and I'm not talking about those bits in particular. All the
There's references that have just gotten lost to time.
yeah,
Like the throwaway line. When Mongo was riding into town, somebody looks and says, Mongo, Mongo, Santa Maria. Mongo Santa Maria is actually a jazz musician.
right. Okay.
Not everybody would know. I didn't know that till a few years ago. Somebody told me. It's like all these times I watched Blazing Saddles, and I'm still hearing getting some of the jokes. Wow.
Well, we're nearly there. We're moving on to our number 2 pick now, and I'm going to let my guest go first, as per normal. So now, because my number 3 pick was the Wild Bunch, so we don't need to talk about that again. So what have you got?
Well, number 2 pick is actually kind of well, I couldn't just pick one, so I went with the Whole Man with No Name trilogy.
Oh, okay, all right.
I picked just one. When I watch one, I have to watch them all. So the trilogy, as a collective, is my number 2 choice. 2 words: Clint Eastwood. 2 more words: pure badass. There's not 3 words.
I mean, I'm going to give you that in this because, in a way, they are almost like one story in 3 parts.
I would say yes. That's fair to say.
I mean, it is technically 3 films, but yeah, and one of them, of course, we've already talked about, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which I think is the last in the trilogy.
That was the final one. The first one was A Fistful of Dollars,
and then the second one is A Few Dollars More.
For a Few Dollars More, 1965.
Which is the one that's got Klaus Kinski in it as one of the bad guys?
For a Few Dollars More.
Yeah, that's right. And he's like the number 2 who breaks the guy out of prison from the first movie, right?
I believe so. I believe that's the one where Lee Van Cleef strikes a match on his
Yeah,
neck.
I remember that. And then the third one is they're all kind of scoping out the same bank. Mm-hmm. And there's the wonderful scene where Lee Van Cleef is like studying the town through his telescope, and then his telescope suddenly lines up with Clint Eastwood's telescope, and he's looking at him sort of over the ridge, which is a great moment of cinema.
A Fistful of Dollars was actually another adaptation of a Japanese film, Yojimbo.
That's right. Yeah, it was. Hollywood nicking stories wherever they could find them. I wonder if they paid any rights for that. Well, it's Italy, that was.
Interestingly enough, the same storyline would be used a couple of more times in 1984 for this really super low budget sword and sorcery movie with David Carradine called The Warrior and the Sorceress. And in 1996, the Bruce Willis gangster movie Last Man Standing used that same plot again.
Do you know, now it's interesting because if we had been saying Westerns, but, you know, any time period, that brings in a whole load of other movies because Last Man Standing really is a Western.
Yeah, it is, but 20s are gangsters.
Yeah, but it's of the gangster time period. So it's also a gangster film in the same way that Miller's Crossing is of that same era. Yeah, I mean, I actually got a bit of time for Last Man. I like Walter Hill movies.
Why?
He's made a couple of turkeys. I wasn't a big fan of Another 48 Hours. That should have been good, but it just wasn't for some reason. But
he also did Extreme Prejudice, which had your thing been more, you know, inclusive, I might have put Extreme Prejudice on there because that kind of is a modern day Western.
I just rewatched that about 7 weeks ago because, of course, one of the actors in that just passed away. I think about a year ago. The bad guy. And he wears the white suit and the cowboy hat, and he has the last Powers Booth. Right, Powers Booth. Another sort.
It was pretty recently he passed away, I guess. Yeah, a few
Yeah,
years ago.
might have been more than a year, but you know how it is. COVID, all the years roll into one. But yeah, I mean, now Extreme Prejudice I saw at the cinema, and we didn't know much about it, but it was just like it's a Water Hill film. It can't be that bad, and it's a basic movie, but it's good and it works. One of the reasons it works is because of the camaraderie between Nick Nolte and Rip Torn in the early scenes. I love their kind of they've got this kind of freewheeling language. Suits you, sir? Yes, sir. And you know that kind of thing. This their own little kind of language. I really like that about their characters. I mean, Rip Torn's character isn't in the movie very long without me spoiling it for anyone. But yeah, that is a really good film. And there's a lot of nods to the Wild Bunch in that movie as well.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, we're talking about the ending, of course, but yeah. So okay, so your number 2 is The Whole Man with No Name trilogy. I mean, if you had to pick a favorite of those three, which one would you say is the strongest?
I was kind of hoping you would not ask that.
Oh, well, always expect the unexpected when you come on this channel, especially where technical things are concerned. That's what I say.
Alrighty. And incidentally, side note, I'm going to have a talk with my wife tonight. If you want me back, by then I should figure out this whole situation.
Yeah. Listen, George, I've definitely got to have you back, and we'll when you've got your, because I know the sound is a bit off with George tonight, but we're streaming it. I'm going to watch it on playback in a bit. I hope it's passable. Some people,
it's my bad, folks. I don't know how to use the microphone on the computer, so
yeah,
I'll do better next time.
George, you got to get yourself one of these, mate. You got to get yourself one of these. So and then you'll all be good. Actually, wasn't
Let's
that?
see what we have here. I know I've been able to talk through the computer before. I don't know what's going on this time, but my wife's the technical mind of the family, so we'll figure it out.
For those people watching at home, we're streaming George's audio via Facebook at the minute, so it's all very entertaining.
And to answer your question, if I had to choose one, all right, I'll go with the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, I think I've got to say that's a trilogy where the films get better each time.
Oh, they sure do.
Because Eastwood gets more comfortable with the role, and Sergio Leone kind of adds things to the characters and builds them, and yeah, so each movie gets better than the last one. I think you're right. I think the third one is the strongest of the three. Yeah, and they go that way in reverse order. Well, my second choice is one that you said would definitely be on the list, and you were right. Is Unforgiven. Another Clint Eastwood movie. I was lucky enough to see this at the cinema at the old Empire Screen 1 in London's Leicester Square, 1992, which anyone who went there will remember. That was an amazing cinema with lightning that used to shoot down the walls before each performance. And you can see that if you go onto YouTube and type in Empire Screen 1 old lightning show or laser show, you can see it. You want to watch the original one. I think there's a few variations, but it's on my list for quite a few reasons. I mean, it's got a great script. It's very real. It feels like you're a fly on the wall on, and I know it is based on a true story of William Money, but it just feels like Clint is on this one. There's no pastiche. It's not a fun movie. It's a very realistic depiction. This is how people feel when they kill people. It's a film that's full of consequences. All the actions of all the characters have consequences in this film, and some of them pay for those consequences with their lives. Brilliant performances by Morgan Freeman, Clint Eastwood, of course. Then the young George, you remember the name of the younger actor who's kind of tagging along and wants to be a hero? I think he was in the.
In my mind, I just have to look up his name, but
I think he was in the. It might have been.
I want to say Jamie Wolvett. I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced. Let me take a quick look. James Wolvett.
Oh well, there you go.
Only he spells his name Jaimz, and his character is called the Schofield Kid.
That's right, and you know, I thought he put in a really solid performance. And I've got to say, I've not seen him in much else. And he seems to have kind of ended his acting career in 2008, according to IMDb. I remember him in a couple of other little bits on telly. And, you know, I thought he did White Fang, the TV series, and some stuff in Lonesome Dove and things. You know, maybe he got enough work and sort of bought the nice house and did the marriage and the kids thing and knocked it all on the head after a bit. But I really rated him. I thought he was cracking in that film.
He was very good. So was Gene Hackman.
I mean, I'm coming. Oh man, now I'm coming on to him in a minute. But yeah, I mean, if Taylor Sheridan is watching, who of course produces 1883, you know, man, give Mr. Wolvitt's agent a call and see what he's up to, because you know you should get him in there. Yeah, I mean, look, the main reason that this film is on my list, you just said it, Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman is one of my favorite. Actually, when people say who's your favorite actor, I had two answers. One was Richard Burton, but he's no longer with us, and Gene Hackman was always my go-to answer for those that are living in the present. My main ambition as a director, which will never be realized, sadly, was to direct Gene Hackman in something. And quite early on, I was told by someone who'd worked with him, you don't direct Gene Hackman, he directs you. And I was like, okay, fair enough. He has retired. I tracked down his wife's furniture store where they make custom wooden furniture, I believe, and also his agent. This is probably about 2 years before he retired. And I just thought, I want to write him a letter, and it's on my computer somewhere. I thought, I just want to write him a letter, and I just want to let him know how much I wanted to work with him. And I know I'm not going to get to work with him, and why, and all the big influence he had on my life with everything from The French Connection and, you know, so many other films. The Package is a almost unseen and unheard of movie of his. That's one of
love The Package.
Such a good movie. Such a good.
Right?
I mean, if I do a stream about films that are kind of set in the Cold War, it's a bit niche subject, but that would be in there. You know, that would be near my number one. And
I saw that at the movies. I recommended it so many times, and nobody heard of it. It was playing in the movies. Like, I don't know it.
Directed by Taylor Hackford, I want to say.
Andrew Davis.
Oh, was it an Andrew Davis movie? Okay, God, that was one of his early films then. And yeah, with Tommy Lee Jones as the bad guy. And I mean, we're jumping topics here, but it's a great film. Really.
If you haven't seen it, hunt it down and see it. The Package, it's terrific.
Yeah. That you know, I mean, it's just worthy of a. Actually, I might recommend The Critical Drinker to review that, or I'll try and get around to doing it myself. Yeah, I mean, Gene Hackman is just. I like about his performances. I think his character's called Bill or Curly Bill or Bill. I think Bill.
I think right, Curly Bill.
And he plays the sheriff. So technically,
it's Little Bill.
Little Bill, that was it. Little Bill. And we never find out why he's called Little Bill. One can only imagine. But I like the way that you know Clint Eastwood's character's not the good guy in the film. Technically, the good guy is Gene Hackman, but he's only the good guy because he's wearing the sheriff's badge. But he's completely he has this deluded self-belief that every action he's taking is for the best interests of the town, but it's really all about his ego. And Richard Harris turns up. He's a famous gunfighter, and Gene Hackman, in one of the most memorable scenes in the film, beats the shit out of him and humiliates him in front of the whole town. And I don't want to get into the story too much, but you've got some really good actors. Saul Rubinek is one of my favorite character actors. He's like a biographer of Richard Harris's character, English Bob. We already talked about Jamie Wolvett. Francis Fisher is cracking in it. One of the oldest character actors of Hollywood. I think he's not long passed away. Anthony James, who plays Skinny Dubois. Yeah, he died in 2020. I don't know if you know the guy that I mean. He was always playing villains on the A-Team and the Incredible Hulk. And if you look him up on IMDb, Anthony James, he's in it. And, you know.
Yeah, I'm looking at him right now. I know exactly.
Yeah, and you sort of, I mean, he must have been a very well-liked man in the industry because he never stopped working. And that's always a good sign for me. And, you know, I remember him in various things like V and so on, but Unforgiven was the last movie that he did, but he lived like that was in 92. He didn't even do any television after that. So I'd be very interested to know what he did for the last 18 years of his life, because
enjoyed his retirement.
I would imagine he enjoys his retirement, but God, I mean, I'm sure he probably did something else. He probably got out of it. He probably had a. I picture like all these cowboy actors going by ranches in Wyoming, and they all live near Kevin Costner, and they all meet up for barbecues and, you know, kind of ride around on their favorite horses and stuff. I'm sure there's got to be a degree of truth in that, because I know Robert Duvall owns a ranch in Wyoming. I know Kevin Costner does. I know Taylor Sheridan does. There's all these Sam Elliott. I know he does. You know, oh man, it would be great to be part of that world, or just a fly on the wall and listen to those stories. But I'm sure they don't get to hang out as much as I imagine. But that's my number 2, Unforgiven. So that means that my number 1 has already been mentioned, which is Silverado, first Western I ever saw in the cinema. And we've talked about that at length already. So there's the dog. So we're going to wrap up soon because we're on number 1 now. So the dog's food won't have to wait too much longer. So
she's just barking. Right now it's time for her to bark at a reflection.
Oh, that's okay. So George, what's your number 1 choice? I'm very curious to know.
Well, before I name my number 1 choice, I want to leave the listeners in a little bit of suspense.
Dun, dun, dun.
Maybe I'd like to tell you what my choice for the worst Western I've ever seen is.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I'm not sure that I've got one, but I'll give it some thought. What's yours?
American Outlaws from 2001.
I saw that, and it was bad. You're right.
Frat boys go west. There was absolutely zero authenticity.
Yeah.
It looked amazingly bad. Trying to see who the director is.
It was Scott Kahn and Colin Farrell. It was directed by Les Mayfield.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Les Mayfield.
It's got
this way. I like Young Guns, but this makes Young Guns look like a classic John Ford Western.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, this is a good time for me to. I've got a little thing here that I prepared. My list of near misses, and I'm gonna put that up on the screen now, and it's going to scroll across, and you can see on there I've got The Searchers, True Grit, Dances with Wolves, 3:10 to Yuma, The Quick and the Dead. So
I love that. Love The Quick and the Dead.
The Quick and the Dead is a great film, and who's the bad guy in that?
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman, yeah, and I mean, he's so good.
Sharon Stone plays the girl with no name.
Leonardo DiCaprio's in it. You've got Lance Henriksen, and it was a very young director.
Damn Yacht Rainey.
Right. And he was really young at the time. And it was also, I believe, might have been the writer's first feature film, but I'm struggling to remember. And
I'm going to look it up as you speak. Quick, and let's see. Quick and the Dead. Directed by Sam Raimi. The writer is Simon Moore.
Right, and yeah, and I really liked it. And that
he wrote the screenplay for Traffic, the movie.
Right. Well, it was a toss up. That was so close to being on my list, and in fact, at one point, it was my number 4, and it got kicked off. But I really do like I mean, let's talk about some near misses before we do your number 1. I really do like The Quick and the Dead. The Searchers, which you had, was there. True Grit, I actually really liked the remake of True Grit.
Me too.
I watched it fairly recently, and I think it's on par with the original. It's one of the few Western remakes that I think is probably as good as the original.
Well, that's what you get when you get the Coen brothers involved.
Yeah,
They are terrific filmmakers.
they are. Coen brothers, Jeff Bridges as your lead. Who played the woman in that now?
Ali Steinfeld.
That's right. Yeah, and she was cracking. And I also really like I got 310 to Yuma on there as on my near misses. Now that's also the remake of 310 to Yuma, which I think is way superior to the original. The action is better. It's more gripping. I think the characters are better. I just think it's a bit better all round.
The original, but I do like the remake.
Yeah, and I mean, Dances with Wolves. It is a Western, but it's also a historical epic. And I was trying to kind of, stay again, like the Alamo. I was kind of trying to stay away from the ones that dipped into history too much. I mean, I know Tombstone is a real event, the OK Corral and all that kind of thing, but it's still very much a kind of fictional depiction of those events. Outlaw Josie Wales was probably another one that you were umming and ahhing about putting on your list, I imagine.
Thought about it. It's a good one. I really like that one.
Yeah, really, really good movie. It's got the kid from The Champ in it, if I remember rightly, who's the one that gets wounded with him and lives for a couple of nights and then dies. Well, okay, so I think you should put us out of our... Come to 10 o'clock, so it's almost time for the stream to end. I'll try and keep them around 90 minutes. So who is your which film is your number one pick?
Once Upon a Time in the West. Sergio Leone again. Ennio Morricone.
Good choice.
This movie was... Okay, so the first time I watched it, ever. Again, maybe around the late 90s. It was on one of the movie channels one night. And I thought, all right, well, I'll put this on, see what it's like. And I just found it so emotionally affecting. And again, that's because of Ennio Morricone. The music really made the movie. Charles Bronson was a great, Clint Eastwood type hero. But the real mind blower in this movie, Henry Fonda is the villain.
Yeah, he's a great villain in it too.
And this movie, I just thought, okay, so it's not one of those action-packed type things. It has a rather slower pace, but it's a beautiful, beautiful movie. And hence, it's my favorite Western of all times.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I've got to agree. It was one that I ummed and ahed about putting on my list. And maybe one of the reasons I thought, I reckon that's going to be on George's list. So there was a couple of those, but it's got a lot of iconic moments. It's inspired a lot of other films. It feels epic as well. It's quite long.
I think it's about close to maybe 2 hours 45 minutes. I think.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not far off 3 hours.
Let's see that up real quick for you. In the West, and it clocks in at 2 hours and 45 minutes, like I thought.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. I mean, and it's not a film that feels short because you've got some scenes that do go on for quite a long time.
This is a masterpiece, and honestly, of his few films, I don't think Sergio Leone ever missed.
Yeah.
Off the genre topic, I can tell you that his final film, Once Upon a Time in America, is probably one of my favorite gangster movies after, Goodfellas and The Godfathers, those mainstays. Once Upon a Time in America, the long cut, not that shortcut that they tried to pawn off on us American audiences.
No, I've seen the long, the remastered long director's cut at the cinema actually.
They were going to release that longer version in 1984, but the studio said, look, it's almost 4 hours. We're not going to get a lot of showings at theaters. We have to cut this at least in half.
Yeah.
I think they cut it down to 2 hours 20. They re-edited it so everything was in chronological order.
Yeah.
And what they ended up doing was making a big effing mess. I
Yeah.
saw some of cable TV. I maybe made it through half an hour at some point, and I was just like, you know what? Screw this. I can't watch this. No, it's the long cut you got to see, and wow. But again, that's not a Western, so bingo.
No, I mean it's got a lot of tropes that are very familiar from the Western genre for sure. And yeah, I mean, definitely a film that I love. I've got the DVD. I don't have the Blu-ray of that actually, but going back to your choice here, Once Upon a Time in America, sorry, Once Upon a Time in the West, great film that I rewatched probably about 2 years ago. And I also think I did see it in the cinema. I think there was an all-nighter, Western all-nighter, and I think that was one of the films that was on.
I would love to see that on a big screen someday.
Yeah, it was good. Because I remember the train station scene on the big screen, and God, it was a while ago. I've seen so many films at the cinema. I just want to thank George for coming on this evening, even though we had some technical issues and the sound is probably not as great as we would like. We'll work these things out as the channel continues to grow and grow. I hope it doesn't put people off. I've got a little thing prepared, so you can, there's a thing for George's website on the screen now. But we also have that in the text below, so it's been there the whole time. Yeah, I mean, I like Westerns. I hope we get to see more. There's been quite a few rubbish ones made recently. They're sort of churning a few out onto the kind of straight to DVD market where they're clearly being shot for under $500,000 or even less.
But there's some good ones too, like you wanted to mention Yellowstone 1883.
Right. So, I mean, but they're not movies, but I do want to mention them before we wrap up. And thank you so much for reminding me. I mean, one of the things that I think where the opportunity lies to revitalize the genre is television now, because everything is streaming platforms now. And, television shows are now getting the proper budgets that they deserve. We've got Masters of the Air coming out soon, which of course is many would consider the kind of next in line of the Band of Brothers series. Huge budget, went very over budget because it was shut down right in the middle of COVID, but can't wait to see that. But one of the shows that really managed to almost circumvent the traditional way of pitching the show was Yellowstone. Yellowstone is like a drama series that's like a cowboy show, but it's set now, about lots of people trying to chip away at the land that surrounds the Yellowstone Ranch, owned by Kevin Costner's character. I think it's just ended its 3rd or 4th season. Is that right?
I'm not really sure. I don't watch that show.
Well, do you know what? When I first watched it, I thought I'm going to like this show because I'm into Westerns. And I sort of watched the first season, and I found the first season quite difficult to get through. So I watched about half the first season, and then I left it. And I left it for a couple of years. And of course, by then there were 3 seasons out. And then I just kept hearing, oh man, Yellowstone, it's got really good. You've got to go back to that, Lance. You've got to go back and check out Yellowstone. And then sometime when I had a bit of a lull in my schedule, I thought, oh yeah, okay, let me blitz, the rest of season 1. And within a week, I'd seen all that I could get my hands on of the remaining episodes. And then, of course, that coincided with the prequel show 1883 coming out in the States. So I had to contact people that I know that work in the industry in the States and beg them to do kind of screen watch parties with me and this sort of thing, because I really wanted to review the show, and I've reviewed it a few places under a different name. I absolutely love it. It's the 1883 is the Western series we've all been waiting for. All the people that are fans of cowboys and cowboy movies and just the genre of the American West. I find it a very truthful depiction of the period. It doesn't pull any punches. The way the narrative is done is really interesting. It's about a group of Europeans who are trying to get to land in the West and settle where there's land still going. And Sam Elliott and some other characters, because of course Sam Elliott's in it, agree to travel with them out there. And Sam Elliott's character fairly early on goes, this is going to be my last trip. And I think he's of the age where he's probably thinking this might be my last kind of drama rodeo as well. So I imagine it's quite an emotional show for him. I think he's a brilliant actor, but it's the production design on the show that really makes it. I mean, the period is so well envisaged, and it's not the same sets. It's not the Silverado set again. I think it is nearly all shot in Wyoming, and that kind of. Have you seen any of 1883, George?
I have not.
Oh man, you're in for a treat.
I should put that on the list and watch.
You're in for a treat.
Okay.
The first gunfight that happens in it comes out of nowhere, and it's so quick and brutal, and you just feel like now I feel like I'm really watching what it was really like.
Right.
People get killed from snake bites. People get killed from cholera. People drown. People fall off horses and die. It just feels like actually shit. This is what the frontier was like, and it was a really dangerous place. And it's got a female lead all the way through season 1. And some people might say that's woke and blah, blah, blah. But I don't think so. I think it's very clever the way they've made her the focus of the story. And you kind of see the world unfolding through her eyes. And I love it. I think it's a great show. Taylor Sheridan has really done the genre proud. And I can't recommend it highly enough. So I'm just going to add that to my little list of things we've talked about and put a timestamp on it later. So George, is it right that basically for your stuff, people have got to go to your website, which is up on the screen now? Do you is there anywhere else you do reviews, or what else can people see of yours? Is there anything else you want to plug, basically?
Well, I also have a Facebook page for Movie Guy 24/7. Whoever's on Facebook, go over and check it out. It's not just reviews. I put up a whole bunch of cool stuff. I have trivia type things. I have cuts from soundtracks, movie clips, trailers. I have themes like Western Wednesday and Thursday comedy and weekend action picture. I'll choose a movie at random and people can just comment on it. So, in short, go to the Facebook page, Movie Guy 24/7, and check it out. I think if you like movies, you're going to have fun with that. So
you're shy about coming on. I'm already following that page, which is, I think maybe that's how we met. I can't remember, but you're shy about coming on camera. But there's a massive face picture of you there with your big beard.
I don't know what it is. Let's just how to put this without sounding completely vain.
Well, I mean, just sound vain. It's fine. Lots of other people do. So, don't let that stop you.
People see a fat guy and they make jokes. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, one of the
I'm not what you call obese, but let's just say I really wish I was my high school weight again.
Yeah, I hear you. Listen, dude, I've put on I think 1.5 stone in COVID. I've just gone up one size in my trousers. So I had to go and buy 2 pairs of jeans recently that I couldn't even afford because, the price of everything has gone astronomically high. And it's the last thing I need to be doing is changing all my clothes. But I had to do that. And there we go.
The more I think about it, it does sound kind of ridiculous. All right, I'll tell you what. The next time we do this, whenever that will be, I will arrange it so I can also get the camera set.
Well, you can put your cowboy hat on. But look, I mean, also, you can see me on camera now. You can only see my head and shoulders. So,
you can put think I could work with that. Okay.
There you go. So we'll figure it out. Put your bandana on, you know. So maybe put you in a dragon costume or something. No one will know when we do our
This
fantasy
isn't
movies.
Masked Singer, dude. This isn't the Masked Movie Critic.
All right.
Do you have it over there, the Masked Singer?
No. No. Oh, I know. Yeah. We do. That's a strange show. I'm not really into it. I have to
We
admit.
tried watching it once and it was just too ridiculous.
Yeah. So.
Okay, go on. I'm sorry.
Oh, interesting. Sorry, somebody's just sent me a story that's just broke about an actor I know. So that's gonna be interesting. Okay. So sorry, that really threw me.
Did somebody die?
No, I don't want to get into it on live on air right now. It's a totally off topic, not for this show. So look, on your page, there's loads of information there. What I've done is I've added your Facebook page to the information below, so everybody can see that. And look, do go and check out George's page. Check out his website. There's loads of lovely reviews on there. He likes to do his reviews old school and write them up. But I'm always looking for co-hosts who love films as much as I do. So hopefully, when George has convinced his wife to splash out on a professional microphone, because I think you need one if you're going to do regular streams on Facebook. I had to twist my own arm to get mine. Just do come on again, mate. I'd love to have you on again. We could do maybe. There's loads of streams I want to do. I'd like to do one about kind of hidden gems of the 80s. Maybe we call it straight to video. You know, those films that didn't get released in the cinema, but occasionally there were some gems in there. Sword and the Sorcerer would definitely be on that list.
I have to give my own. I'll tell you after we're done here.
Yeah. So that'd be great. All right. So listen, I think that's about it from us. We've kind of run over our allotted time a little bit there. I know our viewing figures have been fairly weeny while we've been doing our stream. That's because everybody's going to jump on Phil Davis tomorrow night. It was supposed to be next week, but I'm really grateful for George coming on. I know this is going to stay on the channel. As the channel grows, people will come back and watch these things. And I just love talking about my favorite films. I hope you've enjoyed listening. I hope we've mentioned some films that you haven't seen. And, do check them out. And if you've got things you want to recommend that we do top 10s on, let us know and we'll get on the case. But for now, it's good night from me and it's good night from him. So good night. And don't forget to join us for the Phil Davis interview tomorrow night at 8 p.m.